Grace and peace to you from God our Creator and from Jesus our Redeemer, who loves us so very much. I dislike sweeping generalizations. I bristle at statements that try to put large groups of people together into categories. And for those of you that know me pretty well, you know this is one of my hot buttons. I push back hard at statements such as, everyone is thinking such and feeling such and such about a particular thing. Or we're all upset about this particular issue. The reality, friends, is that each of us is a unique person, a unique child of God. We all have different backgrounds and life experiences. We all encounter and see daily life in different ways, through different lenses, and in different ages and stages of our lives. The world is full of beautiful diversity. So sweeping generalization statements about people, things, or events just don't work. Until now. I'm going to break one of my own core rules and my own core beliefs this morning. During numerous conversations with many of you here and with people outside of church settings, one common theme keeps coming up, especially over these last few years. Fear and uncertainty regarding the state of the world today. And more directly, fear and uncertainty about our lives and the lives of our loved ones as far as what's going to happen in the future. The ongoing effects of the pandemic, the seemingly endless and intractable political divisions in this country, which only seem to be getting worse and worse. Wars in the Ukraine and the Middle East with thousands and thousands of innocent lives lost and a growing humanitarian crisis. The list goes on. Each month, I lead worship services once a month in 2 nearby retirement communities. And in conversations with the people before worship and after, and yes, even sometimes during worship, they'll respond in the middle of a sermon and ask questions, and we go down a little tangent. It's wonderful. It's a very interactive service. I love these people. The same topic keeps coming up from all of them. Pastor Terry, I'm fearful for our world and the way things are going. It seems like there's no hope and that things just seem to keep getting worse and worse. I've never seen things this bad. I've watched the news my whole life and I can't even stand watching the news. Things are so frightening. And remember, friends, these are folks who have lived long, long lives and witnessed some terrible things in their personal lives and in the world, including, in some instances, directly the horrors of war. And now they're expressing fear that they've never seen things in the world so terrible. And it's interesting to me, they're putting those fears about the state of the world over and above any health concerns they have. That's how much it's affecting them, and I know it's affecting a lot of you, a lot of all of us. The people in these retirement communities are really concerned about the world, not so much for themselves, but for the future, for their children and grandchildren. So, friends, here's my sweeping generalization this morning. I'd say that most, dare I say all of us, near and far, have similar fears right now about our own lives, the current state of the world, and the uncertainty we all face in the future. We're all in the same boat on the same turbulent seas of life, and fear is pervasive. Which brings us to Peter and the disciples this morning, from this morning's gospel. As Pastor Heidi shared last Sunday, we are focusing on stories involving Peter the disciple through our journey through Lent. Peter, whose name means rock, is one of Jesus' most steadfast and, at the same time, most unsteady disciple. He's not exactly always rock solid. He wants to follow Jesus with his whole heart, but he seems to keep getting in his own way and failing in that attempt. That sound familiar, friends? So let's notice a few things about Matthew's gospel this morning. First of all, fear. Fear is a key theme. The phrases terrified, cried in fear, "Do not be afraid," and became frightened, all occur in what is a very short gospel reading. And the first thing the disciples were terrified of was not necessarily the storm itself, but the appearance of Jesus walking on the water. "It's a ghost," they cried out in fear. They had a fear of something unknown in the midst of an out-of-control situation. And now let's notice a second common word in today's gospel, in addition to fear. The word immediately occurs 3 times in the gospel, and all are related to Jesus' actions. The story in Matthew takes place directly after Jesus' miracle feeding the 5,000. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go to the other side while he went up the mountain to pray alone. Later, when the disciples cried out in fear, immediately Jesus spoke and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And when Peter's fear and doubt kicked in and he began to sink, Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. The author of Matthew's repeated use of immediately implies a very specific intentionality to Jesus' actions. A third thing to notice in our story is that while everybody in the boat was frightened, only one person, Peter, got out of the boat. Peter's actions changed the trajectory of the entire story. Jesus reached out to Peter to save him, and afterwards, once everybody was safe in the boat, they all worshiped Jesus together, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Peter's faith caused him to get out of the boat that day and move forward toward Jesus. The faith and risk of one person made a difference in the lives of everybody in the boat that day. I see parallels in this story with our own community of faith right here at Grace. This past fall and winter, as the heartbreaking stories of the migrant situation at the border and in our cities unfolded in all of our daily news feeds, Pastor Heidi and a small group of folks took a step of faith into the unknown. In other words, they got out of the boat and looked for a way to make a difference. Soon, can I use the word immediately? Many of you sprung into action and helped in a variety of ways. And within a very, very short time, the empty parsonage next door became an inviting and a safe home for the Diaz family. The seas for them and for all of us were calm, just a small amount for our expanding community. They're still rough, but they calmed a little bit. There's one final piece of today's gospel story I'd like us to notice, namely the trajectory of the characters involved. The disciples are all bouncing around, swirling in fear, looking for sure footing to ground themselves, but they couldn't find any. Peter's trajectory moves from fear to faith to doubt, and then back to fear. But notice Jesus' trajectory. Jesus is always moving in one direction. He's moving towards the disciples. He moves toward them when they're consumed with terror. He moves toward Peter in Peter's time of both faith and doubt. Jesus never stops moving toward his beloveds. And just where does Jesus end up? He ends up in the boat with them. In the boat with them. And then they all worship Jesus together. My dear friends, the seas of our lives are often rough, chaotic, uncertain, and frightening. That's simply how life is at times. Sometimes, during those times of fear, stepping out of the boat, even if we just have a small, tiny fraction of faith, can make a difference. It can make a difference not just in our own personal lives, but to the wider community of others with the help of God. Peter's small step of faith moved the entire story from fear to worship. for everyone in the boat. And as for our lives and in the boat together on the choppy sea of life, know this absolute truth. Jesus is always, always in the boat of life together with us all the time. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Amen.